Hey, before we dive in, I have a quick question. Are you actually growing your podcast or just kind of hoping things take off? If you're tired of guessing what to do next, I've got a free on-demand training that breaks down what's actually working right now in 2025 and how to grow, stay consistent, and monetize your podcast. It's called the Podcast Growth and Monetization Blueprint, and you can start watching it right now. Go to crystalprofit.com/growth and check it out. That's crystalprofit.com/GROWTH. That's crystalprofit.com/growth. Okay, let's get into today's episode. So one thing that I love that is especially fun about my podcast and the content that I create is I get to ask other creators about their podcast journey. So we have had so many people on the show, and I just love that this kind of gets to be their safe space to share their mistakes or share their challenges or share their milestones or celebrations about their podcast. And I thought this would be a really fun opportunity to extend that to some of our members for Podcasters Connect. So I'm sure you've probably heard me talk about this, but Podcasters Connect is our membership where we lean into working on all the different pieces of your content. So we have monthly coaching calls, we do audits, like if you want feedback on how your website flows or, building your email list or things set up properly. So it's more than just me listening to your podcast and saying, oh, it sounds great. It's a lot more of the actual business of creating content to drive more revenue for your business. So today, I am so happy to have Reme on the show. So Reme is one of our premium community members, and I asked a group of people like, hey, I would love to interview you so you could share more of your story. And Reme's this whole interview did not disappoint because her topic that she creates content about is about personal brand stories. So Reme is a personal brand story strategist who works one-on-one with service providers, coaches, and consultants to help them identify which stories to share, when, and why. So it builds trust with new audiences and creates deep connections with potential customers. So she created the 10 story connectors framework for those who feel they don't have a big epic story. Can you relate to that? Because I sure as heck could whenever I first started my podcast. But her framework guides people through sharing 10 meaningful moments from their journey that highlight the benefits and value of what they offer. She is also the host of Who Cares About My Story? And we're going to get into the name of her show and her artwork because it is so dang good. But her podcast is all about how sharing your personal brand story can significantly impact your business. So whether you're just getting started and you want to hear from someone else who is in the trenches doing their show right now, which is exactly what Reme does, or you also want to hear from someone who talks all about personal brand story and understands how important storytelling is, either one of those reasons is an incredible reason to tune into today's episode. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? All right, Profit Podcast listeners, I am so excited for today's guest to be on the show today. So welcome, Reme. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun already.
Yes, this is going to be such an incredible journey. Reme is someone she's in our Podcasters Connect community, and she actually invited me to be on her show, and we're kind of recording these episodes back to back this week. So this is the second time that I've hopped on a call with Reme and we were chatting. So I feel like we're kind of picking up and we can just continue our conversation, but y'all are going to have to go check out. I don't know if it's going to be out in live by the time this episode goes live, but I will absolutely link to our conversation that Reme and I had on her podcast because it was all about storytelling, all about how to tell a good story. I shared stories that I'd never shared anywhere else. So y'all are going to have to go listen to Reme's podcast. But let's just start there, Reme. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do, about your podcast, and let's just get started there.
Sure. So I am Reme Mancera and I am a personal brand story strategist. So I help people to identify which stories to share, when, and why. And I love working around stories. I have been loving stories all my life. I always share this little story of the first time that in my neighborhood, they opened the public library. And I was super excited. I was one of the first people to get the library card because I was just excited about the idea of reading all those books with all those stories, and somehow was a way of traveling, exploring other lives, other cultures, and learning about others. And now I'm so lucky to be working around stories and helping others to use their stories as a way to amplify their impact. So I love that. And then about my podcast, it's called Who Cares About My Story? And the idea is to share the behind the scenes of deciding what to share and what not, and the impact that sharing our story has for our businesses.
Okay, I have to ask before we go any further, who designed your cover art? And we'll make sure on the video version that we have it like come up on screen or something, but did you do this? Like, where did, because when I looked at it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It's so artsy and fun. Like, where did that idea come from? And did you design that? You have to tell us about your artwork because it's really fun.
Oh, I am so honored because a friend of mine, she's an artist, and she offered this cover as a gift to me when I was launching the podcast because she knew how excited I was about the idea of launching this podcast. And she has been talking with me about the podcast idea and so on. So she really knew the idea behind the podcast and the reason, and she created this specific artwork for the podcast. So I am really grateful for that because I love it too.
Well, I was gonna say, you'll have to pass that along. Be like, we love it. I think it's so cool and I think it's so fun. But I also, I had told Reme, I was like, well, let's talk about your story today. Like, let's really dive into the different pieces. And that's one that we will hear some folks share, like, oh, I hired someone on Fiverr to create something, or I did this. But I love that, you had someone in your immediate network. So if anybody's listening to this and you're trying to figure out artwork, like, ask some of the artists that like Reme did, and be like, hey, do you want to create something for me? Like, of course you offer to pay them, or maybe they'll do a favor for you like Reme's friend did. But, having that piece, because it's so different. It is not something that you can just go onto Canva and you realize like, oh, 17 other people have very similar artwork than I do. So I think that that's just one kind of fun behind the scenes story. But what about the title? Because I think even just the title of your name is, or, the podcast name is Who Cares About My Story? What a fantastic, I love that it's a question, like it's posed as a question, because I do think that this is, you and I are storytellers. We talk to people all the time about this, but is that something that just kept coming up and up for you and you just were like, oh, I have to do this? Where did that come from?
So, this is a great question. And I have been thinking about my podcast for months before it started. And somewhere around that, I was like, this is going to be the name. And this is a question that a lot of people in my audience ask themselves. And they have this concern. They listen all the shoots. You should tell your story, but then they have this feeling of, oh, I don't have an epic story to share. Who will care about it? So this question came again and again with people questioning why they should share their stories. So that's when I at some point I was like, this is the name that I like. Something clicked and it's like, this is it. I am not overthinking. I got this one.
I love it. And I think it's such a, from a marketing perspective, from a branding perspective, it automatically attracts the right audience because it's asking that question that they're asking themselves, right? They're already asking that question. So you know immediately that, oh, they're going to either be attracted to this immediately or they're not. And that's fine too. Like we shouldn't be afraid of that. But I think that it's so fun. It's so fun. And now, so let's backtrack into why. I mean, I know you shared about like why stories in particular are really important to you, even from, way back when you were little, of how that impacts your life and how stories just happen. But when it comes to deciding to start a podcast, did you have questions of like, should I do a blog? Do I need to do a YouTube channel? Should I do just social media content? Like, what about podcasting specifically made you say, that's really what I want to do?
First of all, I love listening to podcasts, and I know how you create this intimacy with the show that you are listening to, and it's like you are really getting how they are and their approach to things and their points of view. So as a listener, I appreciate all of that. So I thought that's going to be a great way for myself to do what I wanted. Like what I have clarity on was the goals of the podcast, and then there is several goals there, but mainly I would say 3 of them. So the first one was like sharing this idea of your story is relevant and is worth telling. That's my main message that I like to convey. So using the podcast as a way to convey that, I felt that it's a great way for bringing others to share their experiences. So more the listener can see different points of view and different ways of doing things. And that's my second goal, which is like for people to see like one size fits all formula is not the right way for me. You need to see what is good for you, for your circumstances, for your needs. And then the third goal is related to my positioning. I thought that this could be a great way for me to position as a personal brand story strategist, and also to position my framework, the 10 story connector framework.
Real quick, can we talk about something? Podcasting is a lot. Like, you launch a show and suddenly you're supposed to be a strategist, an editor, a marketer, and a monetization expert all at once. And let's not even talk about trying to stay consistent when life gets busy. That's exactly why I created a brand new free on-demand training called the Podcast Growth and Monetization Blueprint, What's Working Now. Inside, I'm walking you through the 3-part strategy that's helped my students go from overwhelmed and stuck to growing, monetizing, and feeling legit excited to podcast again. And when you watch it, you'll also get the invite to our private community, Podcasters Connect, plus access to our custom AI tool, Podcasters Connect GPT. Yeah, it's a ChatGPT just for our Podcasters Connect community. It's going to help you plan and create content way faster. Head to crystalprofit.com/growth, hit play, and get the clarity you've been craving. That's crystalprofit.com/growth. Now, let's get back to today's episode. I love that. And I'm sitting here thinking about when we ask these questions, we think it's usually like a straightforward answer, but there really are like so many layers, because I'm sure someone's listening and they're like, oh yeah, like when I made that decision, I had like 4 other reasons behind it, or I had a bunch of reasons why I would prefer. Usually people are like, I don't like video that much, or I don't want to do video, so I just did my podcast. But you are absolutely right. Like the intimacy that you create with a podcast is unparalleled. Like you cannot get that type of intimacy. I don't think so. Even on YouTube or any other platform, like it's so special and unique. But also I just think about like having that really deep connection with a podcast yourself as a consumer, and then knowing that that was just the next step in your journey. It's like, it's what makes the most sense. But I want to ask a question about language. Actually, I was thinking about this because yourself, I don't know if you've told everyone, have you said where you're located in the world?
Oh, yeah, we didn't mention yet. Yeah, I am in Spain. I am from Spain, from Malaga, which is a city in the south. Yeah, so in Spain.
Okay, so I wanted to ask this question because I've actually had this come up a lot, and I'd love to hear your thought process on this. I've had a few non-English first speakers ask me, do I need to create my content in English or in my native language? Do I need to, create products and services like marketing? And it's one of those questions that I myself haven't had to ask those questions. So, and I do know that we have a global audience here and we haven't really addressed this before. So could you speak to that? Like, did you have a thought process, or were you considering doing this in Spanish, or is any of your client work or your marketing? Like, let's just kind of talk through that, because I think it'd be helpful for other people listening that they're thinking through those decisions and trying to understand what the best move for them is.
Of course. So for me, when I started my business, I decided to create my communication in English as a way to amplify the amount of people that I will reach with my content and things like that. And I was like, okay, I focus on in-person networking in Spanish, but then my online content is in English. That was like my main thoughts. And then after a while, it was a point where I think about, okay, do I do this in English, or I move to Spanish and English, or just Spanish? And at the end, I decided to keep in English because of all the work that I have done already. And the idea of me starting my business, one of the things that I wanted was work from anywhere with people from all over the world. So because I have the Spanish as my language, it was like, okay, I can speak to anyone in Spanish, and then I can amplify the people that I can talk to by doing English. But I would say this is super personal. And the only thing that I would like to highlight is, even because at the beginning, I remember myself thinking about, okay, my accent and people will not understand me and all that. And for me, it was a moment of, okay, whenever I am in a conversation, I am just focused on trying to communicate with the person. And it's not that much if there is a bit of mispronunciation or anything like that, like now. But yeah, it's more about the communication. And this, with storytelling, you know how powerful it is. So I would say that this is a personal decision, and there is not a right or wrong answer. But for those who are thinking about doing something like that, I will encourage them to do so, because if they are trying to do it, there is something is pushing them into that decision. So yeah, just try, go for it, and experiment.
Yeah, I think it's such good advice. And thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that piece of your story, because I do think that those are I actually heard someone else in our community recently say, well, I don't know that people in like my local community really want what I'm offering, but this could be a global offer and I could work with anyone. And that was kind of the decision that made them want to say, I think I'm going to do this in English too. So like you said, it's a personal choice and it's very layered. Like if you're going to work with people in your local market and that's all you want to do, then great, that's fantastic. But I just really wanted to hear your perspective on if there was an actual thought process in the pieces of making that decision, because I think you're absolutely right. It's going to depend on the person and the type of content they're creating and what they're doing. But it's always, I love sharing different people's perspectives on this show. I think it's what makes our show so special and so powerful, is to hear all the behind the scenes thought processes and all the things. And it's just fun to talk to people about their podcast, because you typically probably wouldn't get these questions on other shows. People are like, we don't really care about that as much, but we do here. We absolutely care about that here. But Reme, I want to go back to just behind the scenes of what your journey has been like just as a creator in general and how you've sought, I guess, resources from different places. Like, just tell me how that worked for you. Like, are you deciding one day, okay, I'm going to start a podcast, and then you're going to YouTube, you're maybe looking up books, or you're listening to other podcasts? Like, what did that really look like for you as you're, because I know that you are excited to get this podcast up and running, but what actually made you say, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to get this podcast. Like like it's going to happen and be a thing.
Yeah. So I was, let's say, thinking a lot about starting it, because it was like, okay, whenever I started, in my mind, I need to commit to this, like having to do it every week or so. So I had this like super rigid thoughts that need to be a certain way, but this was not true, of course. But I had this thought, so I was like overthinking when to start it, because it was like, okay, when I started, I need to keep going and not missing and all that. And at some point, I was listening to a lot of content like yours around creating podcasts and so and so. And then I got the opportunity to work with a podcast manager. And she has a service for launching a podcast. So she really helped me with all the process of the more technical side of things and deciding which hosting to use and all that. That was super handy, because I didn't need to do all this research and then not knowing if I was making the right decision. So that was really helpful. And that also, because the opportunity came in a certain way, was a way of putting a deadline to me, because then it's like, okay, if I want to use this opportunity, there is a timeline, and I decided to go and use it. And so that was helpful as well. But yeah, creative, like at the first stage was more about, okay, learning from others a bit, like YouTube and things like that. But then getting the help of someone was really useful.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that if anybody's listening right now, like, and if you're deciding if you want to have a podcast or like, is this the right thing for me? I cannot tell you how big an accountability partner, like that piece, even if it's just someone to tell you, oh, you should launch on this date. It doesn't have to be
Yes.
someone that walks you through step by step, or even hiring someone like Reme did to do like help you with the logistics and the back end, but just solidifying that date of when you're going to like hit the publish button and things will be live. And I think that that scares a lot of people, and it, as it should. It's launching the thing, right? It's putting, and it's a big deal. I hope that everyone celebrates when they launch their podcast, because it is a really big deal. But I found that so many people get caught up in the, oh, I should do this, or I can't launch until that's ready. And then they get caught in this cycle of thinking and overthinking and doing things. But just having that accountability of saying, nope, I'm going to launch on this specific date and I'm going to put it out into the world. It can just make all the difference. And actually, Reme, I don't know that we covered this yet. When did you actually launch your podcast, and how many episodes are you on right now?
Yeah, so I launched it in April 2024, and at the moment I have 18 episodes, and this go back to the idea of I need to publish every whatever and that, because I decided when I started, instead of doing weekly, I was going to do it like every 2 weeks. And then I was not even thinking about seasons or anything like that. And it was like just putting myself into these rules and all that is like, at a certain point was like, okay, I can do my own rules. I can do this in a way that makes sense for me and for my business, because these are a podcast related to a business. So it's not just something that I do as a hobby, but I need to think about, okay, what is the time that I am investing into this and all that, right? So just for the listener, just give yourself permission to think about what is the best way for you to start, because sometimes that's the thing that we need, right? We need to start and then we figure it out and things can change. For example, I don't say in my podcast when it's going to be the next one. So if I want to change in the future, I will change it. And at the moment, it's like every 2 weeks and it's okay. And at some point, I needed to pause, but I am back. So you need to figure it out what makes sense to you. And there is not just one way of doing things. Just give yourself permission.
I feel like you have been listening, right? You have been listening. That is the thing that we say around here. It's like we've got to figure out what consistency looks like for you, because at the end of the day, we want you to have a sustainable podcast, one that makes sense for you. So I'm so happy to hear that you found something that works for you, for your business. And that, I mean, when we're recording this, it's not quite a year, but you're about to celebrate a full year of having your show. And I think that that's so much fun. We will absolutely, you actually just gave me an idea. I'm like, ooh, we need to celebrate anniversaries in our community, because that would be, like, how fun is that to celebrate with other people? But congratulations. I mean, you're coming up, it'll be a year before you know it. And I think that when you have those milestones, it just is like, oh my gosh, you look back at that day that you launched and you're like, I can't believe I'm already here. And this is like, I've been doing this for that long. But I want to actually pivot into the Podcasters Connect community, because I'm curious, knowing that there was kind of like a time of you podcasting before you had collaboration or like got feedback with other people or talked to other people. What does that look like for you? Or what has the community meant to you? Has there been anything specifically that's been helpful that you didn't have before you joined Podcasters Connect?
I think that the main thing is having a community that understands what you are going through, or they have been there before and you can ask for support or for feedback. But also, that aspect of community. And I know that you talk about this accountability and community, how big they are going to be. And they have been, but this year especially. And it's because when you might have a certain hesitant about something, you can go there and ask for feedback and just bounce ideas. So it's really good to feel that you have the support there. And then in the other hand, like the content audits that you do, I love them, because you can learn so much just by listening to what you are analyzing from others. Like, oh, I haven't thought about that. This is something that I need to pay attention. So this has been really useful. And then the workshops, of course. But I would say the main thing is the community itself, like having a group of people that you can, get like feedback and support from that.
Yeah, well, I love hearing this, because I mean, that's just like, it makes me so happy to hear all of these things, because that's really what we were dreaming about when we created this. And I've talked about this a little bit, not super detailed on the podcast, but previously I would have people reach out to me and they were asking me questions, and I would think, gosh, there's probably 7 other people that had this question. Or people would reach out on Instagram or on a YouTube channel comment. And so it's like I was running a business without having like this community aspect, the way that what I think we have now is so powerful, because it's not a Facebook group where you can get so, I mean, I don't know about you, Remy, but I get so easily distracted anytime I go into Facebook. Even if I'm only going to one specific group, it's like you have to go in with your blinders, and then even then you get sucked into something else. It's like, wait, who's that? What did they say? I want to go check it out. And I feel like with our community, like even today, right before this, like we were, you had said, oh, I don't know if I have the link. And I was like, oh, okay. And then we were just DMing in the chat, but it doesn't feel invasive to me. Like, it doesn't feel like anyone's bothering me. Whereas if I get pinged on Facebook and I'm not like in the headspace to talk business or to talk that, because Facebook's one of those that's like, unless you've always run it as your business, like I'm pre-business on Facebook. So it just still feels like this weird thing. And I know people, when they reach out to me, feel that way too. Like, oh, I don't know if I should be messaging you. So all of that to say, having our community is so special because we can be in conversation. Like, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to the group and ask questions. And like you said, the business audits are, those are just fun for me, if I'm being totally honest. What's one thing that you've heard in one of those that, like you said, it's something to think about or something that you wanted to implement in the future? Was there a specific piece of, I guess, a website audit or looking at content? What's something that stood out to you?
Yeah. Yeah, you were analyzing, I remember now, Carrie's website about her episodes. And there I make notes because it's not just one thing, it's several things that you shared there on things to implement, because that's like a next step that I want to do, like creating an article for each of my episodes. So I was making all the notes because I don't have anything in place yet. So it was perfect timing for me because it's like, yeah, this is perfect because I am getting ready before. So I get the advice before starting. So I have my notes there. So when I am back to this idea, I will take my notes and just put that into place.
Oh, I love hearing that because I do. I think that it's something that, whatever stage of podcasting you're in, like there is something for everyone. Like we have people that have been podcasting almost as long as I've been podcasting. And then we have folks that are just getting started and they're like, I just want to, have fun doing this. And I want to connect, kind of like what you were saying earlier. It's like, I want to hear from people that have been doing this. I want to hear, kind of the ups and downs, the highs and lows. And I think that it's just such a fun group. I mean, of course, I'm going to be biased because I love our community, but I just love hearing that other people are enjoying it too. And they know that when they go there, like, that's what you're getting. Like you're getting high quality people that are on the same journey as you and trying to accomplish really cool stuff, and you can learn from each other. But I want to go back to your journey as a podcaster. It's funny because I listened to this podcast where they talk about it's a bunch of actors and someone is like a classically trained like theater actor. And so he always asked people like, do you have any like stories like from behind the scenes or something that went crazy wrong? I'm like, I need to start asking my guests that. So is there something that's been really memorable that happened on your podcast journey so far that you're just like, oh my gosh, I need to tell everyone, like, don't do this or don't let this happen to you? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I would say technical issues with the recordings and things like that. And then I use a tool for like the captions, because for me it's really important to have the captions for the people that want to go and check it out. This is something I go in a little tangent here, but when I was practicing my English and trying to improve my English, one of the things that I did was listening to Amy Porterfield's podcast with the transcription that she has and following that and learning expression and all that. So that was like learning about the topic, but also practicing English at the same time. So yeah, for me, it's really important to have the captions right. So I have this automated tool, but sometimes it's off. So you need to review them and all that. So that's really important to me. And at some point in one of the episodes was totally wrong. I didn't get it. And it's like, yeah, you need to check it out before going out if this is something that is important to me to have it. Also for people that they cannot listen to the podcast, but they have the opportunity to go to YouTube and read the captions. I believe that that's like, because I am all about repurposing. I know that you love that as well. It's like whenever you are doing some content, if it's a podcast or whatever it is, you want to repurpose that and you want that to get the most out of, like, the most impact possible. So if you can use the same format in different ways and different applications so more people can get that information from them, yeah, I am all for that.
I love that. And I think that it's helpful because even with all the things you can do now with AI, like having that transcription is so powerful as like a jumping off point for all the different ways that you can repurpose. So yes, I totally agree. I think the transcripts are super, super important. What advice would you give people that are in the stage of just starting right now? And we actually we'll come back to that question here in a little bit, but I just want to know from the perspective of where you are today, like reflecting on the last year, almost year. Sorry, let's call it what it is. The almost year. It'll be April soon enough. But looking back, like what's been something that is just you're really proud of? Like you're so proud to be sitting where you are today, having almost been doing this for a year. What's the thing that really stands out to you?
For me, is the how having this podcast has helped my confidence, because one of the first thing is whenever I had this idea for months, I was asking people to be a guest on a podcast that didn't exist. So it's just asking for a jump of faith. And it's like, yeah, I'm creating this podcast. Would you like to be a guest? And asking all the people, and everyone says yes. And that was like really something that touched me. Everyone that I have asked for, they are so open. They support the idea, even if they don't have the capacity for because of their calendar. They are supporting me and just like really appreciating the topics and the things that I do. So that was really something that helped me to keep encouraging me to do so. And at the same time, the feedback from the people that has been a guest, saying that they are looking forward to listen to other people's interviews. That was before starting like publishing the episodes. That was like, okay, this going well. So yeah, it's a confirmation of, okay, what I have in my head, the idea that I have is something that could impact others and could be beneficial, not just the idea that I have, but others are going through this and supporting this idea.
And what is it? Because I want to talk, you touched on something really important there. So it's like that confirmation piece, that validation piece. What does that feel like for you? Because, and I'll share what that feels like for me, but I'd love to hear when someone says, this was so good, Reme, or I really enjoy your podcast, or they like send you a message and say, this is really good what you're doing. Like, how does that make you feel? Like, I know that's kind of like a weird question, but I don't know if you can share with a little bit about how that just makes you feel inside.
Yeah, this like fulfillment feeling. And especially because, as I said before, my first goal with this is sharing this idea that your story matters, that your story is something powerful and it's going to help your audience and your business. So it's really a win-win-win situation. So whenever I get this confirmation from outside, it's like, yeah, you are in the right path. There are things to improve, of course. There are million little details that can be done better, but still the main thought is there, and the idea why it started is going in that direction. So that's powerful.
It is. And I don't know if this happens for you, but what I have found is that will happen on days when I need it the most. When I feel like I'm either questioning everything, because y'all, I have doubts. I have doubts too when I'm doing stuff. And I'm like, is this the right thing? Should I have created that episode or done that interview? And then I'll get a DM or I get an email or someone just says to me, oh my gosh, I listened to this episode. It was so powerful. And it really does. For me, I feel like it happens on those days where I'm like, I just don't know what I'm doing anymore. And then you get that email, you get that message, someone sends you something and you're like, that's right. I'm supposed to keep just like putting one foot in front of the other. It doesn't mean that Reme and I have all the solutions or all the answers, by no means, but it's just like that confirmation piece can be that lifeline to just keep going. Just show up for that next episode, show up and record something else. But I'm just curious if that ever happens to you that way.
Yeah, and something is that also has been really like encouraging is receiving the feedback, as you say, the day that you need it, and also as a way to support you when you are like, oh, I'm not sure if I am. For me, also was about, yeah, I have my doubts. And going back to the language, I had my doubts about how will feel for certain guests going to a podcast and maybe not, if I am not clear on my questions or things like that. That was a concern for me. And I'm glad and I'm proud that I keep going, even if that was a concern. But because the messages that I have received is like, yeah, maybe my words are not the right one every time, but the feeling and the conversation behind the conversation goes through the screen. So that's more important than if there is some word that I misspell or said wrong.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about like that, like you're saying, the universal language of just transcending above all of that and then just having great conversations. It's so powerful. So powerful. Oh my gosh. I could ask you 17 million more questions about your show because I just think what you talk about particular, like I love storytelling. Like I said, we will link to if it's live or whether it's not, like we will link to Reme's show. You're going to have to go check it out. But specifically, I want you to go listen to the episode that we did on her podcast because it was such a fun conversation. We got into the deep stories. Like I said, I shared stuff on the podcast that I hadn't shared before, and they were just, it was so interesting. So I just want to congratulate you on having such a fun show, but also being so great about pulling stories out of other people. So not just sharing stories yourself, but it felt so easy. So I'm just bragging on you now as a podcaster. It felt so easy to share my story on your show. So you have a very great way of interviewing. And I just want to give you big kudos. So if you have questions like, am I a good interviewer? You're an incredible interviewer. It was really, really fun being on your show.
Thank you so much. This means a lot to me, especially coming from you. I know I really like your way of having like just so natural and genuine conversations in your show. So it means a lot that you said that to me.
Yes. I'm giving you all the big hearts, today. Well, you are not going to be a stranger to these, but we have some rapid fire questions that we ask all of our guests. So are you ready, Reme?
I think so.
I think so. Maybe we'll see. Okay, so what is a piece of advice that you would give to a brand new podcaster or content creator?
I have this advice in general for everything related to business. It is simplify and focus. I know that it's easier said than done, but just try to keep it as simple as possible and get the next step.
I love it. Okay, the next one is a two-part question. So what is the dream podcast you would love to be on, and who is the dream guest you would love to interview?
So the first part is both of them. They are a really difficult question because there are so many good podcasts and so many interesting people to interview, right? But I would say one of the podcasts that I love and I really appreciate her content is Mistakes That Made Me from Iman Ismail. I love how she's first of all the podcast, the structure, how she does these natural intros and all that. I love that from the nerdy podcaster perspective, and then again, the conversations, how it flows the conversation, all of that. I love that. So it will be super interesting to be in the other side of the podcast. And then someone to have an interview. I would love to have a conversation with Malala. She's from Pakistan. She's an activist of education rights, especially for girls and women. So I really appreciate her and her story. And part of what she suffered an attack because of her sharing her story. So I feel that she now turning back that and sharing her story her main thing and helping others to raise their voices. I love the inspiration that she is for the world.
I mean, those are both incredible for a dream podcast to be on and a dream guest. I think those are really fantastic. Okay, my last question is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
I would say that I was more a perfectionist, and now I am embracing experimenting as a way to avoid that and try to get progress over perfection and all that. But all these thoughts was like too high level, and I didn't get. And then until someone said, "Yeah, I'm trying to play more and experiment," it's like, that approach can work for my brain. So I keep it. And yeah, when you are looking at things as an experiment, you are allowed to fail, you are allowed to just learning from the things that doesn't go as you expected. So that has helped me a lot.
Yeah, and I think that it's just it's so much more fun. Like when I
Yes.
think back to it, like the experience, like think about like experimenting and play. Like, I think about like a little kid and you're giving them like some Play-Doh or slime or something, and you're just like, have fun, make a mess. Like that just sounds so much more fun than like here you only get these blocks and they have to be perfect and you have to stack them this way. Like that stresses me out just thinking about it. So I love your approach to like, man, it's fun to experiment. So I'm excited that you've adopted that approach because I think it's just more fun in general. But Remy, this was so fun today, and I'm so grateful that you joined us. Can you tell everyone where to learn more about you and check out your show?
Yeah, of course. So I am in the social media, more in Instagram and LinkedIn as Reme Mancera, like my name. And then my website, there you can find the links for the podcast. Also, if you go to whocaresaboutmystory.com, you go to the page and all the links there, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all that. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story. Thank you for being such an active member of Podcasters Connect. Because and if y'all want to learn more about that, y'all have to come hang out with Remy and I because we have fun. And like she said, like we love our audits. We love sitting and chatting about like coaching stuff and everything. So if you do join, ping Remy and ask her about story stuff. If you're struggling with story, come join us and send her a DM. She'd be happy to help you with story things. So please go check her out. But thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. This was amazing. So happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, this conversation was so fun. So fun. Like I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. I just have the luckiest job in the world that I get to sit around and just talk to creators about their stories and hear about their journey because I could when we do these interviews, I could talk to you for 3 hours. So Remy, I just want you to know that. I know you're listening to this. We could have gone on for 3 more hours of the show and I could have gone through every single detail and piece of your story because that's how fun this is for me. And I encourage anyone that's listening, if your content isn't fun, if it's not lighting you up, the people that you're interviewing or the content that you're creating, you're doing something wrong, right? This is my tough love for those of you that are struggling with your content right now. It should not be that hard. You should enjoy the people that you are talking to. You should be excited when you see their name on your calendar as like, oh, that's my interview for the day, or knowing that they're coming up, the preparation that you do to interview someone, like all of those pieces should feel fun and exciting. And this episode today did not disappoint. Please go check out Remy. Go listen to her podcast. I already told you, go check out her artwork. I love her artwork. I think it's so special, so fun. Go check out her show. Go listen to it. We're going to put links to everything in the show notes for you to check out all the exciting things that Remy is doing. But once again, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It was really fun. And this is actually a series that we're doing to spotlight some of our Podcasters Connect members. So you're going to see some more folks joining that are sharing their story really soon. And I cannot wait to share them with you. But if you're listening to this and you want to know more about what you could do to join Podcasters Connect, I'm going to link to, we have a brand new free training. I'm going to put it in the show notes for today because I think it's something that can really help you when it comes to figuring out, well, what is the next step for your podcast and the journey that you're on. So we'll make sure and link to that in the show notes. But If you have not already, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button for today's episode because I want you to hear next week's episode and the week after that and the week after that. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners, thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.